Hi.
Did you say Chris Jenner?
Yeah, because I'm like literally holding my phone up to the microphone and I'm like, it's giving Kris Jenner.
I love my momager.
I'm totally your momager right now. I'm like, what has you worried, sweetie?
Exactly. Honestly, everything.
Yep. You texted me that you're losing sleep. You're tossing and turning. You've texted us like 3 times saying that you're tossing and turning. We're gonna drop the podcast tomorrow morning, 9 a.m.
Yeah.
We have like an hour and a half of tape. So talk to us about what you're thinking and why you're tossing and turning.
I hate that I'm tossing and turning because I wish it wasn't like this. I wish the internet wasn't like this. I wish people weren't like this. I wish the complete lack of humanity and nuance wasn't guiding the way that people are treating each other right now. And I am afraid of it. It's winning in the sense that it's causing me to cower and to fear because I'm seeing people's lives get really wrecked by this. I'm seeing people get really harmed by this, and I'm tired of it. There's enough harm going on that I just am like really exhausted by kind of like what this all means.
Like the whole time you're saying this, I'm just like nodding my head because I agree, which was the whole point of wanting to do the show. Like I'm like, I should be doing a show about being a venture capitalist and companies that I invest in, but I'm doing a
Yeah.
show about resetting an algorithm and ending the era of influence, which I partially helped create through my work at BeautyCon. But it's because there is literally no forum to even just have a conversation. Forget about disagreement. Like I want to disagree once I actually even know what we're disagreeing about. But what sucks right now is that everyone's just at each other's throats before they're even looking at the same thing together.
Yeah.
That's what sucks, is that we can't even get in a room or have a podcast episode about questions and experiences and perspectives without people basically tossing and turning. Like you're tossing and turning, then we started tossing and turning. Then like there's like 4 people tossing and turning over like a podcast episode, and now we're going to basically cut this thing down to like a 40-minute podcast because the internet is too violent and too scary and people are too violent and too scary. It's just vicious.
It also doesn't seem like we're looking at the same thing to what you just said. Like, it's almost like we're watching different television programs and seeing different social media content because the strongholds that people's biases have on the way that they interpret the news and facts. I mean, this goes to kind of like what I do for study, the emotional hijacking of basic science. And we're seeing the same thing happen. And I feel like we're like headed in a really terrifying direction. You know, if the goal is democracy, well, democracy is at stake here.
That is literally why we are doing the show, because democracy is at stake, and I love democracy. It's like, I think it's one of the best inventions of our time. But if we can't talk and explore and think, and you would think we have all the practice to do this because we just went through the 2016 election. We just saw all of this play out with Trump and like Hillary Clinton like eating children in a pizza shop and like all the weird QAnon stuff and all the weird stuff that we saw on the internet during that whole election and after. You would think we're like capable of like having a distinction between like propaganda, fake news, or salacious news and reality. Like no one trusts New York Times, Washington Post, The Guardian, AP, BBC, like whatever, everything, you know, like every single outlet that we've been raised to trust and have confidence in is fake. Every influencer is supposedly being paid or a proxy for someone or a jihadist or this, or like I was just laughing right now because I was like, I was like laughing. I'm like, I should do like an Instagram post. Like I'm a capitalist, non-binary, queer, heteronormative, jihadist Zionist. Like, I'm just like all like we've all been called all of these crazy things, which basically has us in the real world worrying about our address being released, our phone numbers being released, our private information being released, people attacking us online, people ruining our reputations, people threatening our workplace, threatening our clients, our partners. So I think the message I'm getting is it's not safe for any of us right now. We're not safe. So I want you to know, like, the purpose of this is not to get clicks and to drive salacious algorithms, but to actually have safe conversations. And so I think what we're going to do is we're going to cut this down to 40 minutes of what feels safe. And we're going to let the audience know that within the last 24 hours of releasing it, we've cut it down, and we'll release it at a later date when things feel calmer, but that it's not safe for us to have a real authentic conversation. That your reputation, your livelihood, that your well-being is at stake at having an authentic conversation. And so we're going to just do our best to have a conversation that is still meaningful, but not the full breadth of what we were intending to talk about. That's the choice we make as parents. That's the choice we make as adults, as providers, and as friends. And like I said to you, I value this relationship. So I, want to make sure as your momager, I want to make sure that we're in a good space.
I appreciate that. And I think that that's the sad reality of today. I think it's the safest thing we can do. But I also want to say that I'm not going to be silenced by bullies. I think there are boundaries we can set for ourselves because things feel unsafe. But I'm not going to start just ignoring what is the truth. And the truth is there are people who are being brutalized right now who deserve to be
spoken of.
And I just won't stop speaking about that. But I think that, like, everybody needs a fucking timeout.
Agreed. Until the internet can put its fangs away, we're going to save this very powerful conversation. We're going to save parts of it for a later date. And we're going to release a really great conversation tomorrow, but we're going to make sure that we have boundaries and that we're looking out for each other. But we are sadly going to censor the conversation. Seriously. Can you believe that shit? And it's like, we didn't even talk about anything crazy. We literally didn't talk about anything that was nuts. We just talked about big questions and big ideas. And we're going to censor ourselves because the internet is scary. So,
you know what we're not going to censor, and we know what's going to stay true in the edited version and in the full version, is what's going to come through, Moj, is that, like, transformation happens, evolution happens when people, like, lean in and call in and not do the thing that we're seeing that's causing us to do this censorship, right?
Yes.
It's pivoting to what we did, to lean into each other, to choose grace, to choose friendship, to choose understanding, and help people see the big picture, see the full context. Because look at what it's gained. It's gained mutual understanding, expansive views of people's humanity, and a friggin' friendship.
Yes.
Out of chaos.
Yes, I agree. And I'm very proud of the fact that many people are coming onto the show and trust me to do exactly that, which is push the boundaries, but not break our spirit in the process of doing it. Anyhow, we love you. We're proud of you. We're grateful to you. And we will have your back. And we will release these in 2 batches. And when everyone grows up a little bit, you'll get to hear the full conversation.
When you've learned your lesson.
Yeah.
You can have your toy back.
And this is why we can't have nice things.
This is literally why we can't have nice things.
Yeah. And this is why I'm holding my phone like Kris Jenner right now. Love you.
Love you too.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
So with that, we're going to reset the algorithm with Jessica Malaty Rivera. Okay, I'm so excited to have Jessica Malaty Rivera, my new friend, my post October 7th friend. That's what there's like friends that are pre 7th, post 7th. I can't believe I live in a world where I'm lucky enough to have a new friend post 7th. I feel like most people are losing friends post 7th.
Absolutely. I have.
Thank you for joining Reset the Algorithm.
Thanks for having me.
We've decided to just do this show because nobody else is going to do it. But I wanted to have you because you and I have had, the first conversation we had, I was just crying on a Zoom with you.
So was I. Yep. There's lots of feelings.
So give us a quick intro on you. You have a robust, I call you, like I look at your background as the gold standard of immigrant daughter aspiration. All the right.
It's almost gold standard because I deviated from the script a bit and I didn't go to medical school like I said I would in first grade, and my parents still remind me of that when I was in first grade and said I was going to be a doctor, just not that kind of doctor.
Oh, flex your resume, please, for all the immigrant children out there.
Yeah, so thanks again for having me. I'm Jessica Malaty Rivera. I'm an infectious disease epidemiologist and a science communicator. What that means is I spent the last 20 years as a public health professional studying the kind of distribution of disease, the origin of disease, what it does to communities, how to prevent it. My specialty, I would say my niche, is in pandemics. I actually got my master's degree in emerging infectious diseases and biological threats. COVID-19 was, for lack of better terms, my Super Bowl. It is my Super Bowl. It is the thing that I have been training for professionally since my early 20s. And I love what I do. I really, really love what I do. And I especially love the science communicator role that I have because as a first-gen American, English is not my first language. Arabic is my first language because my parents immigrated in the 80s from Egypt to Los Angeles, where I was born. And science communication, I think, is kind of like another language that I speak. It's a way to translate complex topics into language that makes people feel not judged or shamed for not paying attention in biology, helps them understand so they make informed choices for themselves and their communities. And it feels a bit like like another language in my brain. I grew up in Los Angeles, first generation American. My parents left Egypt with broken hearts, to be honest. My parents never wanted to leave, but felt like they had to leave. And this is, I think, a common story in a lot of our diaspora community. I always say that my dad is a very kind of like brutish Arab man. And the two things that make him cry like a baby are talking about his family and talking about Egypt. Mm-hmm. And he speaks about Egypt in a way that is so deeply just nostalgic, wishes for the old days. But his childhood and his adulthood was kind of like robbed by the wars. My dad was born in 1948 and was drafted as a young man to fight in the wars with Israel, 1967 and 1973. He survived, obviously, but a lot of his friends didn't. And it is probably within the subtopic of Egypt, the thing that probably traumatized him the most. And he definitely hasn't worked through that because we know that our parents' generation is not ones to go to therapy. I've begged him for years to go to therapy to unpack all that trauma, and he hasn't. But I get, even, as a 40-year-old daughter of his, just now I'm starting to learn things about those times by these moments that kind of get reawakened from the news where he's like, when I was in the war, this happened. And it shocks me, the amount of like compounded history and traumatic history that's just sitting in his brain that, I'm now, because he's so old, I'm like, God, give me this oral history. Like, I don't want this to go when you go. But, I kind of lived as a third culture kid in a culture in Los Angeles where so many things just didn't make sense to my family, and I had to do a lot of translating culture to my parents, like translating things like sleepovers, which was never allowed, and translating things like having a boyfriend, never allowed.
Oh no.
Yeah, no, dating was not a thing, and showing your midriff was not a thing, and like all the things that were just part of our conservative upbringing. My parents are Christians. Like my family is Egyptian Christian, which is a very small population in Egypt, probably 10%. And even in that 10%, we're like the most minority in that because my family is Protestant. So there's, we've got kind of a ecumenical history, to be honest. There's a little bit of Coptic and a little bit of Catholic and a little bit of Protestant, and we kind of landed on the Protestant side. But even that was crazy because when we moved to California, when my parents moved to California, the only community they had was the Coptic community. And so I actually was baptized Coptic and found out when I was 39 that I had a Coptic baptism name, Miriam. Had no idea. And then when they realized that that wasn't the tradition that they wanted to raise us in, they found a Arab church. It was called Arab Community Christian Church in Los Angeles. That was so beautiful. Our pastor was from Palestine, from Bethlehem. His family was 1948 refugees. I would say half the congregation was Palestinian, and then the rest were a combination of Jordanians, Lebanese, Iraqis, Egyptians, Syrians, you name it, who were all part of the kind of Christian Arab diaspora in Southern California. And that's where I, to be honest, learned a lot about Palestine. It was in church. And in the context of what I think is probably the most helpful education, which is, anti-Christian Zionism theology, kind of learning from people from the land about how toxic the American version is of this theology, of this version of Christianity that I wasn't raised in, thankfully.
So I want to give our listeners a little context of how this conversation came to be. I've known of you, and I think we have a lot of mutual friends for a long time. I think we're similar creatures. We're third culture kids. We're communicators. I was thinking to myself, I'm not a science communicator, but I would consider myself to be one of the best marketers I know. I'm very, very good at it as it relates to brand and digital and comms. And it's like a weird pattern that I can just see and make sense. It's being in a house all the time where you're having to explain yourself, and these people like live in like an alternative universe called Iran. And so yes, I think that does that to us. But when the 7th first happened, I think that I was making an explosion of content and really expressing my heartfelt disdain, disappointment, I guess hatred of the Islamic Republic, and how much I hate their funding of terrorism and proxies, and how I see them as, bad actors, and really, and the root canal, the image that I put up that I think you've chatted with me about, like that this image that I put up about, the root, and there's the crown and the tooth, and then there's the root. And to me, I was very passionate that to me, the root is the Islamic Republic, which I'm still sitting kind of over there. But what I really appreciated about you is that many people have disagreed with me, but you did something that I learned from Professor Loretta Ross, which is you did a call-in. And you did a call-in to me to basically say, I challenge you to learn more and ask more questions and read more information and have a conversation with me, because these people and what they're going through isn't happening just because of Hamas and the Islamic Republic and Hezbollah and the Houthis, which I think it took me a few weeks to even want to be able to no, that's just not how I just couldn't see it that way. But it's because that, I am a traumatized person. I am traumatized by Islamicism and Islamic extremism. I recognize my own blind spots as it's related to that region. And you kind of were like, you should look closer at that blind spot. And so I'm appreciative to you because you really opened up the opportunity for me to ask a lot of questions, acknowledge what I didn't know, and start a learning safari. And I've learned a ton from you, but I think it's generous of spirit for you on behalf of the Palestinian people and frankly on behalf of your own family to do the emotional labor of teaching people about a region that honestly a lot of us just don't know a lot about. I've avoided Israel Palestine like the plague.
Yeah,
I grew
a
up
lot
in
of
LA.
people have.
I grew up in LA. A lot of my friends are Jewish. A lot of my friends are Iranian Jewish. Iranians have a complicated history with Palestine and Palestinian people.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Iranians blame Yasser Arafat for conspiring with Khomeini in 78 for the Iranian revolution. There's so much. It's a movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a multi-saga movie, all of this. So it's loaded, this region. But what I really appreciate about you as an educator, someone that has a background in science and medicine, I was like, she's kind of teaching me about Palestine in the same way that she would be teaching me as if I was scared of this vaccine
Mm-hmm.
and this virus. And I really appreciated that you didn't write me off as just an asshole, but that you wrote me off or that you called me in as someone that just needed more information. And so I'd love to hear your perspective on what happened there because that's my perspective. And we can talk about why we cried on the Zoom and all the things. But I'd love to hear how that occurred for you because I've seen you like really emotionally exploding over some of the content that we've both been following. And it's, I'd love for you to talk about like how your experience was of calling in.
Yeah. First of all, Moj, I think that your memory of this is incredibly accurate and very self-aware in a way that like deeply encourages me that me stepping into that call-in was the right thing, because to watch you transform has been really healing even for me to watch, because I have seen that little transformation happen in other friends, and it's almost like the kind of friend who can evolve on an issue, because what you were saying was not necessarily propaganda or misinformation that I was trying to debunk. It was like, this is an incomplete picture, and I want to just open the horizon a bit to show you that. And that's why I leaned in and called you in. That's because I could tell that there was a lens that was a very informed lens, your personal experience, your parents' experience, your traumatic experience, that needed to be validated, right? But it also needed to be expanded, because there's so much more to this. And I think a lot of times people view Israel-Palestine as too complicated. And it's why it's one of the ways in which propaganda has worked, by keeping people distanced from it, by saying you're not a scholar in Middle East politics and dynamics, so you should really stay out of this. This is above your pay grade. This is outside of your expertise, so don't engage. I get accused of that all the time because people don't know my history. People don't know my proximity to the issue. And I try to do it in a way that does not center me, because I am not Palestinian and I am not directly impacted, even though I directly care, and that's where I try to show that like every human has the capacity to care about this in a way that is more gracious, more empathy driven, more liberation minded, more, equity focused, like all of the things, all the values that a lot of my leftist friends claim to hold dear. I see this selectiveness about the issue. I think there's like one of the most brilliant titles, a book that Mark Lamont Hill wrote is Except for Palestine. There's like this red line of leftism, of wokeism, of whatever you want to call it, Democrat politics, that we're going to be super pro woman, pro, freedom, pro liberation, except for Palestine, because either it's too complicated or I've been fed a narrative that deviating from it would be too costly. And a lot of people think that that cost is too high.
So part of the mission of this show is really to start to explore the voices of futurists, because I'm convinced that we don't need more people at the table. We just need a new table. We need stronger educators. We need people who are willing to re-examine the feelings, the facts, the experiences, but also the solutions. Today I'm not as consumed about who started what on the 7th or what happened on the 6th or what the past 75 years were. Like for me, I'm just looking at like a human rights crisis of bodies that are being damaged, that need to not be damaged and need to be taken care of immediately with aid, and we need to stop bombing these people. Right?
I'm going to push back on that a little bit and say that damaged is not enough. We are seeing torture and brutalization and horror, and to soften that, I think, does a disservice to the 30,000+ people who have been murdered. You know, they didn't die, they were killed. They didn't, they weren't, in friendly fire or like, attacked upon. They were targeted. There's a deep intentionality about everything that's been happening, and I don't want to turn people's gaze away from how vitriolic this really is.
What is this that has the world turning a blind eye to this group of people not having their own country, their own sovereignty, their own water, their own power? Why are they being occupied in the West Bank? Why are they living in a blockade?
It's the status quo, Moj. That's the problem. It's not individuals, it's the status quo. We have been, since 1948, fed a story about the why that is deeply problematic and by definition racist and cruel.
What's the lie?
The lie is that Palestine was a empty, barren land, and that what was going to be fixed was providing a people without a land without a people. And there was a land that had people, that had deep culture and connection to that land. Now, to say that like they couldn't have shared that land is not what we're trying to say here. But to erase a people and to deny a land that had been fertile and beautiful and cultivated by indigenous Palestinians and even indigenous Palestinian Jewish people is revisionist history. And I think when we try to blame individuals like the Bibis and the Yasser Arafat and the the Trumps and the Bidens, whatever, you're missing the point. Not you, but like people are missing the point that like we can't deviate from the script. The script has been written, and when you deviate from the script, what do you get called? You get called an anti-Semite. You get called a racist. You get called a Nazi. Like all of these horrible, horrible accusations, because this is what it should be, because it's what it was decided in 1948. Despite the fact that since 48, there have been a number of attempts to kind of course correct, and even the borders in 1967, which have never really even been respected, we can't even agree on that. I mean, personally, Moj, I think two-state is dead. I think two-state has been dead for a long time. And we keep...
Everyone I know who has a brain, like an actual brain.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, this thing is, it's like you've got Gaza over here, West Bank over there, like they got to just be together. I made the mistake early on of just being like, hey, we had the Civil War in America, like we killed each other. We lost 600,000 people in the Civil War. We don't like each other, but we live together.
Yeah.
And, but it seems like seriously so everyone always asks me, like, I get accused a lot of being like a Zionist. You're like a dirty something awful Western imperial Zionist. So I'm like, I'm an October 6th Zionist in the sense, like, I believe Israel has a right to exist. I'm not the defend itself part. To me, like, I'm like, if this is what it is, no, I don't believe this is
Well, this is not self-defense. Anybody with eyes knows that this is not self-defense.
Whatever the words are that people want to call it, collective punishment, not self-defense, genocide, whatever it is fundamentally, energetically just not working for the planet. People are having an allergic reaction to whatever this is. I am like an energy person. I do believe in viruses, energy, the way things spread. And this is not the same as Afghanistan. I'm old enough to have lived through all of that. This definitely does give a little bit of Iraq, like when we invaded someone that had nothing to do with 9/11. It's giving that. But why is this shit so complicated? Like, why is this thing so complicated? I don't understand. There's all these Arab countries. Why can't they help? Just help me understand that. Okay, that's the question I have, because I'm an outlier and surrounded by, like, we're Iranian. You know how we are. We're Iranian. Yeah. We're not Arabs. You guys are like, you're not really us. We're like, we're not really you.
You can be Middle Eastern, but you can't be Arab.
Right. We're over here. We're not Arabs. Help me understand. Why can't, with all of these billions of Muslims around, like everyone makes this as a Muslim issue. People make this an Arab issue. Okay, so what is this issue? Because me, I'm like, there's 15 million Palestinians. There's 15 million Jews. You're both an endangered group. Like you're small in terms of.
I mean, Moj, this goes back to like the status quo and the fundamental design of the state of Israel, which does not actually, and this is where I find some of the biggest, like, you know, government evangelists to be so cruel in that they lie and say that it's a democracy, and they lie and say that people have equal rights, when we know that neither of those things are true. This is not about religion, except for the fact that if you are Jewish, you have more rights.
And when you say more rights, do you mean more rights in like Israel proper, or are you talking about the apartheid in the West Bank?
But mutually the same thing. Both things are the same.
So then when all these influencers go to Israel, like whatever that one guy is, I'm not going to say his name, but the one that's like,
yes,
does all the TikToks.
They're getting a very, very
he's like, I'm
biased view.
Where's the apartheid? Like, what? I feel stupid. I'm like, I haven't been to Israel, so I don't know. Is there?
I have.
Okay.
There is apartheid, and there's apartheid in the sense, and this is the thing. This is not my opinion. This is the factual finding of multiple human rights organizations: Amnesty, Beit Salem, which is an Israeli human rights organization, Human Rights Watch, have all been able to say, by investigating the legality and the application of law in Israel and Palestine, that people don't have equal rights, that the wall separates hundreds of Palestinian communities. There are some roads that some cars can be on. There are different license plates for different cars. There are different curfew rules of if you're on the other side and you don't go back to your territory by 10 p.m., you can be imprisoned.
And are you talking West Bank or are you talking not West Bank?
I'm talking West Bank right here.
Yeah, I mean, the West Bank looks like a shit show to me.
It is a shit show. It is a shit show. And it's deeply hurtful.
I mean, we've seen that movie before. That looks like Jim Crow. We've seen that.
It is.
Like, I know that I won't shut up, and everyone and their mother needs to go see Ava DuVernay's Origin. You need to cancel. Everyone needs to go see this movie. Yeah. But it's clear that's not a place to live, West Bank.
Yeah. No, there is an institutional regime of oppression and domination. And
why is it like this?
Because it is considered a way to preserve a Jewish majority by not having equal rights for both Palestinians and Jewish Israelis. And it is, I mean, Amnesty even said as much, that like
nobody likes Amnesty. If I post anything Amnesty, I get throw up emojis because they're anti-Semitic.
Here's the thing: this is like moving the goalpost, because now Amnesty, the entire United Nations, UNICEF, Red Cross, Save the Children, the WHO, UNICEF, Dr. Tedros, everybody is an anti-Semite now. Like,
I don't know.
To be anti-Semitic, no, they're not. And this is where I think the accusation is so violent, because anti-Semitism is a disgusting, horrible, horrible sentiment that should be abolished from this world. To be anti-Semitic is to be evil. I want to say that on the record multiple times. But to call people that you disagree with, or people who make you feel uncomfortable, anti-Semitic because they're challenging views that you grew up with or challenging views that you were told to believe by a propaganda system, by political biases, is so manipulative.
So we're going to talk about anti-Semitism, which is one of the most ancient forms of hatred. It's thousands of years old. People have been ethnically cleansed. They have been killed. They have been chased. They have been alienated. They have been pushed out of their homes. They have been terrified and killed throughout various different regions around the world. We're not talking about a couple hundred years. We're talking about a few thousand years. And so many of us are learning about anti-Semitism for the first time because it's not something that maybe all of us were raised with, but it's something that's deeply impacted Jewish communities, and it's deeply impacted most of Europe and the Middle East. It is such a heavy, heavy topic because it comes tied to a history that's tied to the Holocaust, which is to this day one of the world's largest traumas and wounds and most violent experiences of humanity we've ever seen. So we have to dig deep and hold space for the pain and trauma of what Jewish people are dealing with today. And we have to also be able to accept that people who are born in Israel today and those people are not their governments, just the same way that the children who are born in Gaza or the West Bank today are not their governments, are not Hamas, and are not directly accountable and responsible for the crimes of October 7th. We have to be able to hold space for the fact that most of us are inheriting a series of bad decisions that were made over the past 100+ years, terrible leaders, terrible policies, failed leadership. And now we're dealing with a group of people on both sides and all sides who are now dealing with the impact and the absolute wipeout of these decisions. And as you can see, we're not really able to hold space and a lot of empathy and sympathy for each other in this moment. There are people who are outwardly anti-Semitic. You're seeing people display anti-Semitic communication, vandalism, crimes, chants, terrifying people on their way to synagogue or dropping their kids off at school. At the same time, you're seeing anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian rhetoric, anti-Muslim rhetoric worldwide. And it is fair to say both of these groups are in deep levels of pain, deep levels of trauma, deeply feeling unloved, deeply feeling afraid, deeply feeling terrified. And we're just like in a trauma wound right now. I think everyone who's from this region, regardless of the side, is deeply, deeply, deeply in pain. And most of us don't have the words, the vernacular, the history to really be able to understand each other. And so I think we really do need to, as a society, lean into learning more about anti-Semitism and not just the Holocaust. Like, how did the Holocaust even actually come to be? How did that happen? That wasn't just an all of a sudden thing. How did Palestine come to be? That wasn't just an all of a sudden thing. And so being able to hold space for both of these things is extremely important and necessary. And I think we all need to really challenge ourselves to better understand how we arrived in this moment. Jewish people deserve to feel safe and need to be protected, but shouldn't even need to be protected because persecution shouldn't even be on the table. We also live in a time where what has gone on with Palestine, or the lack of an existence of Palestine, is really problematic and a problem. And we can't just blame that whole problem on Hamas and the Islamic Republic. We can acknowledge it plays a huge part of why we can't resolve it in this moment, but we cannot say that the history of Israel and Palestine all sits on the shoulders of just Hamas and the Islamic Republic. There is a dysfunction that has been going on there for some time that has shown up in a dysfunctional relationship that looks like everything from an occupation to a blockade to violence to a continuing always-on war. And that has been going on long before Hamas. There has been a massive conflict going on here. And so I think it's a mistake for us to just put it all on the shoulders of Hamas, even though I myself did that nonstop for the first few months. I acknowledge that that was not the full story. I just personally hate the Islamic Republic, so I was comfortable there. But I do understand, and that's why Jessica is so important, is that she was able to introduce and educate me on the full context of not just the past 16, 17 years of Hamas, but the past 7,500 years of Palestine being under constant vulnerability, risk, occupation, war, unhappiness, lack of joy, unhealthy, lack of thriving, whatever you want to call it. Just, we're not talking about happy Palestinian people as a whole. And so they deserve happiness. They deserve joy. They deserve well-being. They deserve their own sovereignty. And that can't come at the cost of anti-Semitism. That's what cannot happen. Free Palestine cannot come at the cost of anti-Semitism and Jewish people being unsafe, being victims, being murdered, being killed, being cleansed, being the subject of aggression. And so we have to be able to have both. We have to be able to have Jewish people safe and secure and Palestinian people being safe and secure. Easy, right? Back to it. But my question is this. Do you believe both Israeli and Palestinians can be de-radicalized to live with each other without killing each other? Like, let's say right now they live in one place.
do if we abolish apartheid. I do. If we believe in liberation for all, if we believe in equality for all, equal citizenship, equal access to things, equal voting, equal, whatever it is, so that there are Palestinians today in the diaspora who have fewer rights to land that their parents were born on than people who could be partially Jewish and say, I want to do Aliyah and I want to move there and resettle there.
The folks that I speak to in Israel right now, who were previously consider themselves left, progressive, and, protesting the government, I don't think they want to live in a country with outside of the 2 million Arabs that are there. I don't think they want any more. I think
that's deeply fucked up, Moj.
I'm not saying it's not fucked up. I'm just saying after I saw Origin, I was like, holy fuck, this is what it is.
That makes me feel so sad, because I also feel like the people who are protesting Netanyahu, the people who've been protesting him prior to October 7th for 50 weeks straight, because he wanted to sack the judiciary.
They're scared. They're dealing with full-time, always on news. I mean, missiles over their heads, the hostages that are missing, a 1-year-old taken. It's all, and again, people can contest what happened and what didn't happen, but we know for sure human beings that had nothing to do with the military of IDF were taken as hostages, which, as someone whose family member was a hostage of the Islamic Republic for 5 years, came home 140 some odd days, 10 days before the 7th. How's that? He was one of the 5 swapped. We never thought about dropping a zillion million bombs for him to get out, by the way. It's news to me that could even be done to get hostages out, but that's another topic. But I think you have a group of people that are highly, highly, highly traumatized and dealing with an influx of information that genuinely makes them feel unsafe. And if someone even hears me say feel unsafe, they'll say, fuck you, I am unsafe. I had to say to someone last week, how many trans and non-binary people do you think were murdered in hate crimes last year? What do you think the number is? They're like, I don't know. And I'm like, hundreds. Majority brown, black. Slade, actually viciously murdered. Here's the FBI stats and the articles. How many black people? How many women? How many Asian people? How many Muslims? How many people died from hate crimes associated to anti-Semitism? Nobody liked the numbers once I gave all the numbers, because thank God it's been since 2018 that someone was murdered in a hate crime through anti-Semitism. So but it doesn't matter, these stats, because people just feel fucking unsafe. They hear River to the Sea on the college campuses. The swastikas going up, spraying it all over the houses. How do you deal with, okay, this is why I'm talking to you, because
hate crimes are happening and Palestinians are being killed and shot in broad daylight and stabbed.
How do you as an educator, because that's why I wanted to talk. You're an educator. This is what you do. You educated me. You got me to think about things. I'm still like, I don't know about Hamas. I'm not cool with them. Like, I'm just never going to be cool with them.
And I'm not asking you to be cool with them. That's not my goal here. My goal here is to humanize the Palestinians who have gone through centuries of dehumanization.
But I do not believe that every single person in Hamas should be like fucking like, just like I don't believe that every single person in the IRGC should be lined up and executed. I don't believe every single Basiji should be executed. I'm not a capital punishment. Everyone gets slaughtered for associating person, right? But leaders, people, directors, directly, people who are involved who should be held accountable. Yes. But my question for you is, as an educator, what do you do with a lot of people who've all been given bad information? You are a COVID-19 person. Like, you got people to stick a fucking vaccine in their bodies over and over again, and none of us wanted to do it. I didn't want to do it at all, ever.
Wow.
Didn't want the booster, didn't want to do any of that business. And did I believe it was a government created thing for a minute? Yep. I was like fully like, what is this? How could this be? You know, you educated a lot of millions of people to do this thing, wait in line in their cars to go get shots. Why can't you convince people? What do you see here that we're not seeing? And how do you bring, you're saying you have a better for me product called One State Solution. Yes?
Yes. But
Tell
also, I think this is like a really interesting point. This is a very interesting point. The reason why it's easier for me to communicate and encourage things like vaccination is because I am dealing with an invisible pathogen that affects every single person who has a pulse, regardless of where they live. Because pathogens, viruses, bacteria, don't care about national borders. They cross over from person to person no matter where you are, on an airplane, across the continent. You and I, living on two different parts of the earth, are at risk of COVID. You and I, living in California, are not dodging the attacks. So we can look at it like observers with our popcorn in our comfortable homes and have an opinion like it's something that you're going to bet on whose team is going to win. That's the difference. The difference is the immediate threat. Now, some people look at that immediate threat as, okay, my security is inextricably linked with the security of Israel. Some people look at it as my security is inextricably linked to my family who is under occupation and being murdered in the tens of thousands right before my eyes on broad daylight, in broad daylight, live streamed all over the internet. It's a very different kind of threat analysis here, where it's individual or it's community or it's actually happening imminently to your family. And this is where I think that like most people can take a pass and live in their myopic view of the world where that's not my problem. That's a complicated, my husband and I just finished watching The Sopranos for the first time 25 years later than everybody else. And I was like having a reaction to the last season because the son, this is 25 years ago, is having this existential crisis about the state of the world. And he mentions the Israeli-Palestinian conflict multiple times. And you're like, it's almost cliche to say, oh, it's just the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's just kind of one of the mainstays in our society, in our like zeitgeist, in our, what's happening in the world. There's always going to be something there because nobody is thinking futures. Nobody is thinking, how do we undo the status quo? Nobody is thinking, maybe the status quo is the problem.
Okay. I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to ask you a couple of personal questions. Friendship breakups.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit how we bonded.
Yeah.
Kind of brutal for us because there's so few people like us in the diaspora that are first generation, Jewish, American, Iranian, Egyptian, you're Christian. Like there's so few of us. And to watch so many, our groups now they're broken.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to be friends again.
I think there are some friendships that can't recover from this.
Right.
Sadly, this isn't the first time for me, and I don't know if it is the first time for you, but I've spoken about Palestine many, many times before I had a platform and since I've had a platform. I have been involved in Palestinian activism since I was a child. I've protested and I've, been an ally for my whole life. And that has been a costly thing for me. It has allowed me to have deep, rich, beautiful community, but it has also caused fractures, some irreparable, some permanently fractured. Some have resolved a bit and some have not, but this one is next level, I think, partially because I have a big platform and people love to tell me what I can and can't speak to.
Nobody
I get
tells
a
you
lot
what
of no, I mean, nobody really does, but people love to police a brown woman. A loud brown woman, and I get told a lot of times to stay in my lane, to which I say this is very much my lane. Not because of me being an Egyptian, diaspora daughter of a person who was affected by the wars, and connected to the Palestinian Christian community in particular, but because I'm a human. This is my lane. Anybody who doesn't see that this is like a deeply human issue is, I think, got a lot of blind spots. But I haven't even fully processed the grief of some of these friendship shifts. I think because the grief of what's happening right now, to be watching what's happening right now is so overwhelming that I don't even have room for more grief. I have moments where I am like, wow, damn, like that person unfollowed me, or that person won't return my texts, or, that person is very different in my eyes now, and I had no idea that they were so cruel, is something that I think will take years to unpack and years to process, because we've always said that for humanity, Palestine was a red line. Palestine was the litmus test. And I think this is the moment. I mean, when we say this is worse than the Nakba, we're not being hyperbolic. This is worse than the Nakba, which is the moment I think that all of us were dreading to see where people fall on this red line.
I kind of just refuse to not care about everybody.
Yeah.
I refuse to not think about that baby Kafir every day because he's only 1 year old and my son is 10 months old, and I think about his little red hair every fucking day.
Yeah.
I don't know why. He fucking fucks me up, that little kid.
Yeah.
Because he's so little. You know how they are at that little age. They just need you.
There was a 1-month-old 2 days ago. Born in this war and killed in this war.
That dad demolished me in the insides. I don't understand why I do not understand. If I had a magic wand, everyone would put down their fucking flags. They would get in the streets. They would demand and march for the end of this war immediately. An immediate like medical aid and sovereignty to Palestine. I know that there's the big question, is it one state, and these fucking hostages come home. Like,
Moj, we've been saying that for every single protest. Like, literally every demonstration that is calling for a ceasefire is saying, please, for the love of God, not a single more human needs to die.
We as communicators need to find a way to then bring that to the light, because it's not getting air, and and I hate the algorithms. For the record, Meta, you're responsible for the election.
Absolutely.
Meta, you're responsible for this. Like, Adam, Mark, you know what you did in 2016.
Deprioritizing political content, which deeply affects people of color and marginalized. Yeah.
Amplifying hateful trauma content. I could go make a video right now crying, saying how much I love everyone. It'll get no likes. I can make a video right now saying how much I hate the Islamic Republic. I'll get 1 million views. So it's like, that's them. And thanks so much. And we see you now.
Yeah.
My last question for you. Why do you think the left doesn't care about the women life freedom movement? Like, why don't they care about those girls and that humanitarian issue over there? What is it that has them look the other way? Is it because they hate the West and
it's because the status quo, Moj. It's because the status quo. America is a deeply flawed country. And I know this actually breaks my immigrant parents' heart, because they, as much as they, don't think America's perfect, they very much believe this is the best place we could be. It's the land of opportunity. It's the land of the American dream. And so when I shit on America, they're like, how ungrateful, and I'm like, to not criticize America is to not be aware of what's happening and to not be living in this world. And I truly feel like at the end of the day, until America is ready to decouple from its hyper-capitalist, hyper-imperialist, hyper-colonialist mentality, we're going to continue to be seeing this type of ambivalence to causes like women life freedom, to causes like Palestinian liberation, because these things keep America rich. These things keep America in business.
Do you believe that there's multiple colonizers and imperialists on this planet right now, not just America?
Totally. Absolutely. They all work with each other.
Because I don't think the East is over there like innocent, woe is me, just like, you know.
No, of course not. No,
They
there
know-
are colonizer
they know-
energy is not just America. It's
right.
not just white, but it is mostly white. And I will say till my dying day that like America is not going to deviate from the script unless it makes financial sense for America. And that is where I feel like my pessimism really takes over.
I mean, it's not pessimistic. You're smart. You know that we have $27 trillion of debt. We got to pay it down somehow. We want to keep interest low, and we got to keep the Fed going. That's like, you can only do that with so many things.
Yeah.
You can only buy so many iPhones. What's better is to sell tanks.
Oh, so much better to sell tanks.
But I think the fact is that we live in a world that is like, until we demilitarize our thinking, and that's what I'm asking of everyone. Can you solve Iran's issue without military intervention? Can you get rid of Hamas or disempower them without military? Because it feels like if ChatGPT can like take your LSAT, why can we not find ways to dismantle, including what's going on here in this country with women's rights, gay rights, trans rights, all the rollbacks? Why can't we find a demilitarized solution? Why can we not find demilitarized solutions?
I mean, look at how uncomfortable America is with anti-racism.
Yeah,
because it
funny,
causes like pearl
funny?
clutching.
That was
like
really funny. They were like, you know what? That
too much.
It wasn't even too much. It was like, it's abusive and it's abusing. You're like, it's abusing
who? Your little white kid's brain. Like this is what was really rich to me too, especially coming from like a very religious background. It's okay to tell kids that you're horrible, sinful worms that are deserving of God's wrath, but don't tell them they're racist because their little minds can't handle it.
I think you should see Cass. I think you should see Origin, because that movie blew my mind into a gazillion million things, because the whole setup is she's propositioned to write a big article about Trayvon and can't wrap her head around how to write it because it's a Hispanic man who kills Trayvon.
Yeah.
So she goes down the road of learning about caste systems, how Nazi Germany studied Jim Crow, segregation and slavery, implemented apartheid in Nazi Germany in the mid-30s. Then that led to the Holocaust. And then she goes to India and reads about the work of like Martin Luther King, who the only place that would publish his caste publications, his articles, was Ebony magazine.
Yeah.
And it was just, my mind was blown, because it helps you understand how people of the same skin and kin can actually oppress each other. But there's an obsession on our planet with supremacy. It's beyond.
In hierarchy, in all things, in business and in families.
So how many of the people in your life that you've broken up with you think are gone for good?
Ooh, probably a dozen. Yeah.
I wonder if I would be happier and healthier if I would just let my dozen go, but I'm holding on.
Yeah.
I'm like, I refuse to like not challenge and be in the conversation with them still.
I haven't severed anybody. I have felt pushed.
I'm definitely
yeah. There are some people whose content and whose opinions deeply grieve me, and I want to believe that they have the capacity to evolve, you know, because I want to believe that when they say that they are anti-racist and pro, you know, choice and pro, you know, LGBTQ and pro-black and pro-indigenous, that also means that they can be pro-Palestinians because they're humans too, you know, that they can. I also find the manipulation of like, I'm a pro-Palestinian, but I think this, you know, you've seen that trope of like, I'm not anti-Palestinian. And you're like, actually, you are in your application of like this type of liberation ideology.
I haven't seen a pro-Palestinian event or march or gathering that hasn't been called Jew-hating Hamas. I haven't.
Which which is absurd. Yeah. It's disgusting because to be Arab is to be called a terrorist. Right now feels very similar to how September 2011 felt. I worry about the safety of my friends and family. I worry when I am speaking Arabic in public. I worry when I wear a kufiya when I'm not in the Bay. The Bay is like super down. But I hope that, I mean, especially because I have 3 young kids, I want my kids to grow up to see a liberated Palestine. And I want my kids to see how peace can be possible, how equality can be possible without the harm of a whole people group. I think that can happen.
I'm a firm believer that all of this is kind of interconnected. And so I think you need a couple things to unlock in order for Palestine to have the peace that it wants.
The peace that it deserves.
It deserves. It absolutely fucking deserves. It deserves it. That video of Motaz coming out that he was like, I left Gaza because I couldn't figure out what was wrong with the world. So I left Gaza to come out and find out what's wrong with everyone.
Yeah.
And his face when he said that, I think everyone needs to look at his face. His face looks like the face of someone who is insanely disappointed in us.
Absolutely. I mean, if you haven't changed as a human since October 7th, then I question your humanity. If you haven't seen your children, their laughter, their smile, their fear, their hunger in the eyes of children in Gaza, then I question your humanity. Like, I really can't understand how anybody with a pulse could hear what Motaz is saying or see what we're all seeing and be like, it sounds like a them problem.
Well, people need to find a way to hold space for both.
Yeah.
Because I think, unfortunately, I've chosen to stand like kind of right the fuck there in the middle in this moment, holding tight to like both sides of facts, feelings, and experiences, believing that both sides are entitled to safety and justice. And what I feel very strongly is we are being so fucked over by bad leaders and bad governments. People in charge of us are awful. They don't care about us.
And bad systems that have been in place for a very, very long time that need undoing. I mean, Moj, I think that your evolution is powerful. And I think I don't consider myself fully evolved. I feel like we talked about this in our first Zoom, like I'm a forever student. I'm getting my doctorate right now because I can't stop learning. Like, I think that everybody needs to learn and everybody needs to lean into the biases that they have, the blind spot that they have, and expand their horizon on this.
I would hope, if nothing else, even if they don't want to do that, they should just be aware of the fact that these are just like human beings, period. And then period. No one should have to go through what they're going through right now. But I think if we don't find a way to end this, we're going to be sick. We're going to get really sick. And so that's my concern. I appreciate you for taking the time. I really want to talk to you after you see Origin.
I know. I need to really see that.
But I want Palestine to be free, and I want them to be fucking having joy, by the way. I want to go there and eat their food and hang out.
Nothing is greater.
You know, I want them to have what they deserve it. I also want Jewish people and Israeli people to have what they need and what they want to be happy. And I don't think anyone...
As long as it's not at the cost of any other people.
We can learn how to do that. It shouldn't be for anybody. It shouldn't be for anybody. To me, if I had a magic wand, I would just basically have only secular governments. That's my magic wand.
I mean,
that's my magic wand.
One can hope and dream, right?
That would be mine. No Islamic Republic, no Islamic Pakistan, no Islam, like just no
like
government.
Let's abolish theocracies. If we're really going to be pro-democracy, then what are we even talking about here?
That's what I would do. I would have, my magic wand is 0 theocracies, 0 like it's democracy or nothing for everyone, and that's it. And everyone gets voted out every 4 fucking years, and there is no supreme this and supreme that. Sorry about it, dude. You gotta go.
Make it happen, Moj.
I'm working on it. But first we gotta get everyone awake to the same shit, because people see these kids dying and they're like, well, they're fucking Hamas. And I'm like, they are literally not Hamas. They're not. They're 5. They're 4. They're 0. This is not Hamas. The mother is not Hamas. So thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being generous with me. Thank you for teaching me. Praying for peace, praying for the end of this war, return to peace, return to everyone in their homes, return the fucking hostages, just fucking stick all of these asshole leaders in one room and let them rot there. My magic wand. That's what I would like to see.
Well,
trapped in a room and like Hannibal Lecter, like glass, and we just like walk by and watch like Khamenei hanging out with like Bibi Netanyahu, and like they just gotta be there. That's it. Like washing each other's underwear like after 10 years, you know? Like, no, dude, y'all suck.
Got work to do.
Okay, go have the best day ever. Save us from pandemic diseases, and we appreciate you, Jessica. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I really love you.
I love you too. A lot. I really do. Go see Origin.
I will. I promise. It's on my to-do list. High on it.
Blew my mind.